Hello, everyone. This is Robert Paler, former Cal rugby player and now executive director of the Big C Society. Together with us today are Sarah Schwartz, a liaison director for Women's Crew on the Big C Society Board of Directors, and our special guest today, Erin Cafaro of Cal Women's Crew, a two-time gold medal Olympian in the 4-seat and the 8-seat boat for Team USA. And she's a performance coach, entrepreneur, and current clinical psychology student at the Wright Institute of UC Berkeley. For some additional context, here's a bit more background on Erin's ridiculous sports accomplishments. Erin is one of the most decorated female rowers in American history and the most decorated Cal rower, male or female. She was a standout oarswoman at Cal, helping win the NCAA National Championship in both 2005 and 2006. She is an 11-time World Cup medalist, 6-time rowing world championship medalist, and 2-time Olympic gold medalist, as I mentioned, in both the 4 and the 8. So, Erin, I can imagine your neck's probably getting pretty tired holding up all those medals. Now, Erin is also a 2-time honoree of the World Rowing Crew of the Year and 2009 U.S. Rowing Female Athlete of the Year, and an inductee of the National Rowing Foundation Hall of Fame. Sarah, is there anything else you want to add to make Erin blush even more?
All of those things are so true and so kind of regal about Erin. I'd say just to kind of bring it down to earth a bit, as a Cal athlete, Erin was such a phenomenal, just inspiring former teammate to look up to. When I was a freshman, Erin ran the freshman workouts down at the dungeon that we would call it at Edwards Stadium. And when it was 2015, Erin was the keynote speaker at the national championship. And when we were all sitting there listening to her speak, we felt such immense pride that Erin was speaking to the entire NCAA conference before we were just about to kick off. And there couldn't have been anything more exciting to get us ready to race than seeing a Cal athlete up there talking about her experience at Cal and as a well-renowned athlete. So she's an awesome athlete, but she's our athlete, our Cal Bear. And so we're so excited to be able to have this interview with you today.
All right. Are you blushing, Erin?
Over the top. Thank you, guys. I apologize for all of that. You guys did a wonderful job doing your homework. But I guess it's all too necessary to start at Cal because that's where all of my rowing career started. So.
Absolutely. Well, we want to dive into that a little bit right off the bat. So you're from Modesto, and the last time I checked, there's not a lot of water in Modesto, just canals. And it's kind of hard for me to imagine some boat or a crew rowing down a canal in Modesto. So I'm guessing there wasn't a lot of rowing when you were growing up. Is that right?
Totally. Yes. Yeah. And I've thought about it if a boat could fit in a canal, but no, didn't want to play in those, but I grew up playing a little bit of everything, I actually started dancing when I was really young. And I danced up until junior high school. When, my dad said, well, kid, you gotta start playing sports. Dancing is such a wonderful discipline, to actually, for every athlete, right? For athletics, but it's, it got unhealthy for me. And so he wanted me to transition to sports. And so I started playing basketball and softball. And really, I really fell in love with basketball. And I actually even, called around to coaches to walk on, as, just a bench warmer. Cause I love the sport so much. And I still do. I still have a basketball and go, shoot around every now and again. But my parents, really wanted me to find somewhere that could help, find a sport that could help, maybe financially support my education as well. And lo and behold, Crew was still accepting, walk-ons that had no experience, just an athletic background. And I believe it was Tom Homo, my brother actually was a football player at Cal. And when he was playing, Tom was the coach. And, at one of the picnics after a game, I was talking to him and, he said, you should really there's this rowing thing. You should try that out. And so he actually ended up talking to the head coach at Cal for me and vouching for, the athleticism in the Cafaro family. But yeah, I have a lot of people to thank for being able to walk on at Cal with absolutely no experience rowing.
Yeah. So you said your brother played football at Cal, and I want to dive into that a little bit. Like, what about your family dynamic? Like, your father, your brother, did that also play a role in you wanting to get into rowing and then to Cal?
Yes. So yeah, my brother is I've never had another big brother, but I think he's the best one out there. He really even from a young age, he's just such a gentle soul, which is so funny because he was a defensive lineman, but he would let me play with he and his friends growing up. So outside, a lot of time where I grew up, it was the Central Valley, California. It was still pretty typical gender lines of the girls are inside playing dolls and the boys are outside. And I wanted to play outside. And I especially wanted to hang out, with my brother. And so he let me go out and play with he and his friends. And he would every time give me a pep talk and be like, only rule is there are no different rules for girls. You have to play by the same rules. And I said, no problem. Here we go. And so I have a lot to thank for him for being really inclusive of me, and tolerant because, I was the annoying little sister, I'm sure. But, letting me come out and kind of play hard. We would do home run derby, roller derby, broke some bones and got all scraped up. But I think that was really laid a solid foundation for me to kind of walk onto this really, Division I team without any experience of all right, these are the rules. Let's go, But I remember going to Cal football games as a senior in high school. And, the new stadium is beautiful. And it's uncanny, especially the suite up there where you can have all you can eat sushi. But there's something very majestic about that old stadium for me. I just remember going in there and I loved the old rickety benches. And it just was so massive. I think it was the most people I've ever seen in one place. And all just had the same, the energy was just encapsulated in this bucket, in this bowl, if you will.
Yeah.
So I imagine that it's still somewhat the same. I imagine everybody's missing football season right now and being able to be in the energy bucket together. But I remember being really enamored with that and thinking I really want to go to a big school. And I really want to go somewhere where, my big brother is as well. And I really think luck has a lot to do with being, especially getting to the upper echelons of any sport. And that these were just kind of the little sparks that helped me get to where I went, in rowing.
Totally. So dive into that a little bit, because so you said you find out about Cal and you're loving the university, your brother's there, and you're rough and tumbling with your brothers and stuff like that. You know, you're resilient, you're breaking bones, you said in your own words. Did you just show up to the rowing coaches and, you know, say, hey, here I am, and they took you on? Or, you know, was there a process of you in high school learning about rowing? Can you tell me about that too? Like that process of high school to Cal in a rowing perspective?
Yeah. So, it was a little bit of a rough start. As Sarah can attest, like rowing is the land of the giants. Like they're physiological freaks. Like they're just these gorgeous, at least, you know, like, and even on the men's side, like they're just these specimens of like human physiology that you're just like, wait, like how did you get all this like genetic luck in one fell swoop, you know, like, yes. Especially at Cal, where you have brains, you have like the brawn, and you have these like, you know, dragon lungs. And I'm like, what the hell? So anyhow, I'm a little undersized for the sport, you know, and so with that, you know, rowing is a game of levers. Like the longer your arms and legs are, the more you can keep your blade in the water, the more torque you can get, more power, you know, every stroke. And I really, really like the idea that it was such a simple sport, you know, that it gave such automatic feedback. And I didn't even know really what I was signing up for, but I knew I wanted to go to Cal, and I knew this was a way to get in. And so I knew I wanted to go to a West Coast school. So I started calling coaches up and down the West Coast, like UW, Cal, Stanford, not knowing that these are actually like the best rowing schools in the country. So, you know, I guess I could have done my homework a little bit better. And they said, oh, you know, what's your 2K score? And I'm like, I have no idea what a 2K is. And so this is kind of like when Yahoo was coming out. I don't think Google maybe was really out yet. So I was like, what the hell is a 2K? And so I looked it up. And it's on this like Concept 2 ergometer. And I was like, well, I got to find one of those. And so I found a rowing club in Stockton, which is another 209 represent, small little town in the Central Valley. And they, you know, were borrowing all this like old equipment from UOP used to have a rowing team. And so I went out to the Stockton Rowing Club. I think it was their second year with the club. And I think it was like a Model B, which is, you know, I think we're at D or E now. And so anyhow, it wasn't a bicycle wheel, which is the first, you know, rowing machine, but it was the second version of it. And I just started, you know, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to sit down and do 2,000 meters because that's what they're all asking for. And so I did. And I ended up calling the coaches back. And yeah, nobody really called me back. They're like, how tall are you? Like, what did you do? Like, you know, most of them were just messages, as I can recall. But the only person who called me back was the Cal freshman coach, Ellen Menzer, and she said, you know, we got a call from Tom Homo, and, you know, we hear your brother's a really good athlete. So come on for a visit. And so I went out, and Ellen actually didn't end up being the freshman coach. It was another woman by the name of Sarah Nevin at this time. And she was going around asking all these recruits of like, what are your scores? Like, you know, what's your rowing experience? And I just like blurted out something like, like 9:59 or something. It was, the score keeps on going up, but it was a really bad score. And she just looked at me and she said, don't ever say that again. Like, pretend that you didn't say that. I'm just going to pretend that you didn't say that. And so, I don't know. Now the story's out, and I can all laugh about it because I ended up being okay on the rowing machine. But Yeah, they you know, by the grace of, you know, something, they let me into Cal, not because of my physical prowess by any means, but yeah, again, another really lucky kind of act of faith, I guess it was, that I would turn out.
So you get to Cal, which is this elite rowing program. And if I know anything about Cal rowing, is that it's defined by really hard training. For example, the sweaty long haul erg workouts and the dungeon, you know, the glorious training facility in the bowels of Memorial Stadium, those early AM workouts over on Riona's Reservoir, where metrics like VO2 max and pain threshold are tested daily. Was it at Cal when you developed this relentless drive you have to push the human body over the edge and beyond?
That's a good question. I think this is such an interesting question. And I suppose part of the reason why I wanted to go into psychology, like, you know, this X factor, I think as some coaches call it, right? Like that they're trying to recruit, like this relentless drive. That's so hard to teach, right? Are you born with it, or can you develop it? Can it be taught? I don't know. Like my mom seems to think that I was born with it. We actually had a conversation last night about it. You know, she was saying that my brother, you know, kind of came out of the womb and he was just kind of aware of everybody and everything. And he's just like the most sociable guy. He's like the mayor of, you know, whatever town he lives in. And he's just like aware of everybody around him. But I was always like hyper focused, like detail oriented. So I think that might have been something, but I think it has to be cultivated. You know, like I don't think it's something you have or you don't have. I really think, and from what I understand in a lot of the research, like context really matters. Like where you grow up, who you're surrounded by. Do you have the environment to actually play this out? You know, like play this drive out. And is it? You know, what kind of coach do you have? Are they the right coach for you to actually express this drive in the right way? You know, so there's so many different factors, but I think it was stoked at Cal, and the reason I think that is because I remember as a freshman seeing. I just walked onto this team that was full of these like really fully formed, mature athletes, like the senior squad. I don't know, Sarah, if you've heard about it, but like the 2001 squad was like that was the first time we'd ever medaled at NCAAs. And it really, you know, I had no idea what I was doing. I was a freshman and I had, you know, hadn't taken a stroke really in my life. And so, but there was the likes of a woman named Megan Cook. There's another guy called Moose. You know, there's just really good leadership. And they just not only worked hard and just showed up and worked hard, but they also talked to, you know, the freshmen and talked to the lower classmen and like brought us along, which I think was really special. So one, seeing that, you know, just this consistency of them showing up every day, and, you know, working hard. And then two, that they actually like accepted us into their community. Like, I think that was really helpful for me to realize that like this intensity I think that I was born with could actually be useful in this community. So
that's just really poignant, like really strikes me, just that idea that, you know, everyone's kind of this canvas and you have these things you're born with. People have these certain predispositions, but if you don't have that environment, if you don't have those leaders like you had to show you the way, then maybe it can't happen, like maybe that fire can't be stoked. You can't work with those embers and that structure that you have. That
Absolutely.
really resonates with me. Yeah. Yeah. So you say like you're an inch or two shorter than your teammates, right? And I've learned just in my basic research.
At least. Yeah.
Totally. And I've learned just like in my basic research that the technique you use to get long in your stroke to compensate for these missing inches can put an unnatural strain on your body. And I heard that you broke 5 different ribs training for the Olympics from this tension in your abs and lats and the connective tissue in between, which just sounds crazy to me for someone who's not in the sport. Can you tell us the story of Cal to be getting to the Olympic team twice and deconstruct what you think you did differently in your approach that allowed you to win gold in the 4 and the 8 for Team USA?
Yeah. I mean, kind of going back to the breaking ribs, it's such a hard concept to explain to people in like contact sports, why would you hurt yourself? Like what kind of game is that you're continuing to hurt yourself? Cause that's, very rare that somebody has like a, contact injury in rowing. Sometimes, the oar will come back and get you in the face or stick somebody in the back of the kidney. But for the most part, a lot of rowing is just dealing with internal pain that you're inflicting on yourself. So when I put it that way, it sounds so enticing, right? But
give me in. Sign me up.
I know, like sign me up. But there's something that that's just so interesting about knowing yourself that well, like in knowing your own, like at least for me, that I found so interesting about testing my own pain boundaries, or what I perceived were my own pain boundaries, and just becoming kind of intimate with the feeling of pain. And so I don't know, I'm trying not to digress too much, because this is kind of, again, where I kind of want to go into my studies into psychology of, I think that there is this, there is this ability to, you just have to become accustomed to being mentally tough and desensitizing yourself in a way to pain, and, wanting to just be part of something that's maybe bigger than yourself. But I also think that on the back end of that, it can be dangerous because you become so, well, I guess I'll speak for myself, because I became so specialized. And I think that's almost like the nature of being really good at something, is that you have to become so focused and so specialized in something. But the trade-off is that I became kind of unaware of everything else around me. Right. And with that, I think that there was just like this relentless drive, if you will, to achieve something great. But what I found at the end of it is it was never going to be enough. Like there's always another level, right? Like that there's always going to be more pain. There's always more success to be had. And so, I think I digress a little bit, but there is a cost to winning. And I think there is a cost to specializing.
That is just like so powerful. I mean, I'm writing things down. Like
my brain just kind of blew up there for a minute. I guess I kind of So one of the things that we used to do, I'm not sure if they did when you were an athlete at Cal, Erin, was they would have speakers come and speak to the entire athletic department. And I remember, and it was supposed to be motivational, or maybe it was around certain topics, but I remember sitting there and there was a speaker who came, and his entire presentation was, the crux of it was basically be a river, not a flood. And the message was, be a river, focus on what what you're supposed to be focusing on. Don't get distracted by, we were at Cal, partying, clubs. That's how at least I interpreted it. And so it was this, what I perceived to be such an amazing opportunity to talk to the entire the student athletes about the opportunity that they had while being on Cal campus to take advantage of the entire environment and the entire culture. And this guy really got up there and was like, don't get distracted. Like, focus on winning, focus on doing what you want to do. And I thought it was, it really hit me hard because I was struggling at the time as an athlete with being on this amazing campus, the opportunities that were available to us as athletes that we really didn't get to experience because we were being told to be so focused and so disciplined. And so I guess what you kind of talked about just a couple seconds ago, that crux really, resonated with me, especially in the context of that story when we were at Cal and someone saying, be a river, not a flood. And, be so focused mentally and physically on your sport that you don't have the opportunity to explore these other pieces of your identity, which I think really is a disservice to the athletes, because at the end of their experience, they have to be able to kind of zoom out the lens and be able to figure out who they are. And for 4 years, they've trained to kind of quiet that down.
Yeah. That's so interesting, Sarah, that you kind of had that curiosity. Like, even, I think in college, you're just such a sponge, but and you're starting to question things and what, authority or what people are saying, and they're teaching you how to critically think. But I think that is just, that goes to show why you're so successful now, because you probably took a pause and were like, wait a second, this might not be what I want to do. I don't want to be hyper focused on something. And to be honest, this is where I kind of maybe go into the gray a little bit, but I don't think there's a wrong way. I actually don't think it's a bad thing to be hyper focused. I don't think by any means it's a bad thing to be zoomed out and be more well-rounded, like Machiavellian. I just think it really matters how you integrate that into your story, into your entire narrative, and just being really clear about the meaning of it. And so that's kind of what I'm finding, and I'm finding a lot of crossover. And, I worked with the recovering alcoholic and pretty severe recovery population last year with in a clinic. And there's just so much crossover in what I saw in this transition from sport, it's just so hard sometimes to look at the past and think, I could have done this, or I should have done this. When instead it's really about making some sense of it. This is part of who I am. This is the decision I made. And, this is how I want to move forward. This is what I want to focus on now. So, I think that there is something I think you're spot on, Sarah. There is something that you are sacrificing by being hyper-focused. And I also think there's something being sacrificed by not being decisive, and choosing a path. So, there's no wrong way. It's how do you make sense of it?
Totally agree. Yeah.
That's really powerful. And jumping back to your rowing career here, I mean, I was practically running out of breath in the beginning, just talking about all your accolades and, everything you've done in your rowing career. Can you tell the story of this other side of your Olympics experience? We talk about it like this man on the moon syndrome, when you're coming down this mountain, and that shift in identity you had from Olympic athlete to civilian, or this real life, as it were. How did that transition play out for you?
Yeah, you really did do your homework, Robert. I think this idea of, I heard this like man on the moon syndrome from a friend who he works like over in, robotics at NASA. And when I was telling him my experience, after winning the second Olympics, well, let me rewind. So the first Olympics, I was on the national team for a couple years, and it was like this really quick, like ascent, really tumultuous. I was injured every 6 months, and then found my like groove, found a great mentor, and made the team in 2008. So I made the first Olympics, and we won. And it was all just, it all happened really quickly, and I didn't know what was happening. There's this great photo of me on the podium with like all of my teammates like smiling and like crying. And then I'm like one step away looking at them being like, I don't know what just happened. But like also I'm like, was almost like dumbfounded. Like, did that, like, wait, what just happened, And so I remember standing on the podium and being like, I need to do that again. Like, I didn't really feel that. Like, I don't think I did that right. Like that shouldn't, I'm missing something. Like, I should feel really satisfied standing up here on the podium. Because isn't that what everybody dreams of, and like what we're all working for? Like, there's something at the end of the rainbow, right? And so I was like, okay, let me go back. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do it right. Like, I'm going to do all 4 years and like really like grind in and, just become a better, more aware athlete. And lo and behold, to Sarah's point, I think I went deeper down the river. And I just, fortunately, found myself standing on top of the podium again in 2012. Mind you, I was part of an amazing group of women, that, I was not by any means in a single, I was not a single person that made this happen. So I was just, again, luck that I was part of these phenomenal athletes and humans as teammates, that we were able to win twice together. And then the core of the team stayed together in 2012 as well. And so I found myself, again, at the top of the podium. And I remember, again, watching, I was always in the back of the boat. I was kind of like, again, one of the smaller athletes, but I had the view, the purview of like everybody and their process. And I'm watching them and they're crying. And I felt like these really hot tears streaming down my face too. And I'm like, I don't know what these mean, but I did not feel fulfilled or happy, I think I was really scared, because I was like, I did this all again. And thinking that like standing at the top of this podium is really gonna make me feel this finality of happiness and like arrival, or like that I did it all right and everything else is just gonna that hard work pays off, and that the world will make sense, and it didn't. If anything, it made everything feel more confusing, because I was just like, I don't feel fulfilled at all. Like, in fact, I want to go again. and that was the point where I decided I need to retire. Like, I'm chasing something that I don't think I can ever capture. And lo and behold, this is actually quite a research phenomenon in happiness. I think they call it like the hedonic treadmill of like, you can never quite achieve happiness, if you will. It's like looming in the shadows. And so, what was satisfying, at one time will never be quite satisfying the next time. And so you're always just chasing this, thing that you can't really grasp onto. And so, that's when I knew I needed to move on, and find something else that was more, that I felt could be more fulfilling for me.
Did you?
I just.
Oh,
go ahead,
I was going to
Sarah.
say, did you communicate that to anyone on your team at the time? Did you talk about that kind of stuff?
No, no. I don't think I had the words for it. I also think, again, to go into like the wonderful thing about being specialized is I was so fluent in movement. Like I really knew how to express myself through movement and training. And like, I could, if I did this with my pinky, or I, put a little bit more weight on my big toe, but I didn't really know how to use words. And as you well know, Sarah, like the culture of rowing is not, I guess it's all about mental toughness. And there's really, from what I'm finding, like no room for like emotional intelligence, really. And so I was embarrassed. Like I was embarrassed that I wasn't feeling great at the top of the podium. And like, I went around, the worst part of this is like, I went around to, I got to talk to all of these elementary schools and do, these speeches, and everybody wanted that. That's the question I would always get. Like, how did it feel to stand at the top of the podium and hear the national anthem? And I lied. I had to say what they wanted to hear. Until now, when I'm like, I actually think in a weird, sick way, I think this story is more hopeful. So that's why I've just begun to share this side of it. Because I think that there is, I don't know, in going this far down in elite sports, I think you have to be aware of what you're going towards and what you're going to be up against in the transition, right? Every athlete at Cal is probably really, really good at their craft, right? And so it's a wonderful place to be because it's like positively reinforced by like family, community. You get all these like, positive reinforcements for putting yourself through pain, right? And entertaining and let's be honest, it actually feels really good. It feels really good to win. It feels really good to be part of a team. I don't want to take that part away. Like I think that was really what drove me. But this idea that success at the end is going to make it all worth it, I think that story needs to change.
I just want to say like how much I relate to this. We talked online a little bit, and you're familiar with my story. And for everybody who's listening, I was paralyzed in the 2017 Collegiate Rugby National Championship, complete quadriplegic, couldn't move or feel anything below my neck. And my doctor said I never would again. And I didn't believe him.
Yeah.
I said, screw that. And I fought it. And 8 months of rehab and 8 to 9 hours a day, I was able to get on my feet. And just like, you know, you have this vision in your mind, like this picture, and this is how it's going to feel when I stand on the podium. I had that similar vision in my life in a different context, where when I get on my feet, everything's going to feel great. It's going to be this moment of finality. And, you know, and I do it. I like beat all the odds. You know, I walk in, I sit back in my chair afterwards, and I'm like, that was it. You know, it's done. And like you said earlier too, there's no finish line. Once you finish that, it's on to the next tag. It's like, okay, Robert, go over to your next workout now. That's just like so poignant, that story you have. So, you know, if maybe success isn't, you know, me getting on my feet, doing what doctors told me would never happen. If success isn't getting on the podium 2 times in the Olympics, what do you think success is?
First of all, I want to thank you for sharing that story, because I think that's even more powerful. I mean, it's something I actually have a curiosity about. You know, I had this theory that people whose sporting careers, you know, didn't end in this ideal, you know, way, that I thought they adjusted better, because they still had this fight, you know, and that they, you know, still had this hope. So I still think it's true. But I just think that's such an interesting, like, parallel story about like getting on your feet and then realizing, okay, and now I have to go back to work, you know? Yeah. So back to your question about success. I don't know. I have a really tough time, knowing understanding what success is, or thinking that that's what we're all going for anyhow. Right. I think it's something it's a very westernized concept in, you know, this individualistic society that we are part of. And it has this, you know, again, like, wonderful message of like accepting everybody's individuality, right? Like, we accept a lot of people who are persecuted because, their individuality isn't accepted. So, not knocking our culture by any means. But this, like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, like, you know, self-made, successful person, and then retire at age 65. Like, I think it's an unfinished story, because I think the success is being flexible, right? Success is, to me, like, accepting the different life phases, and just like the uncertainty of it all. Actually, that's like, from what I'm learning, like in psychology, that's the goal. Like, that's the goal of helping people, become more comfortable with themselves, right? Like in therapy, like, goal is to tolerate more distress. Actually, it's not to be more successful. It's actually to tolerate more distress. And then in another, like, orientation, it's to tolerate more ambiguity. So to be able to hold more uncertainty. And I when I learned that, I was like, yes, like that kind of, I feel like I can grab onto that concept of like, no, it's not about like getting a house or like a picket fence or retiring, you know, at a certain age. I think it's literally like, how much can we cope with, you know, and how gracefully can we do it? Yeah. So
You know what just came into my mind was Rocky Balboa, the motivational speech that just about everybody knows. Life's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That just like, it strikes an extreme parallel to what you just spoke about, like how much you can take. And I think that's rooted in sports and athletics. You talked about rowing, you're inflicting pain on yourself. You're doing these things that just seem insane, but you keep going for it. You keep pushing through that. You got like hairs standing up on my skin right now. And that is just like, that's powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I want to dive into your career journey, your career arc post Olympics and everything, and you're a performance coach. And by the way, I want you to be my performance coach now after listening to all of this. But what made you choose this career as your post-professionals career? Was it out of kind of a form of convenience and familiarity because you were already this expert as maxing out and pushing your body? What is it that made you want to get into this career once you decided to retire?
Okay. So obviously, if you haven't learned already, things aren't quite black and white with me. So I guess I'll take us back to like being on the podium in 2012 and realizing like, shit, this isn't it. Like this isn't fulfilling me. And so at that time, had just been surrounded by some really wonderful coaches. And so I'm like, that's it. Like, I need to just pay it forward. Like, that's going to be more fulfilling to help somebody, live out their dreams, and share, all this knowledge I have, about how I got to the top of the podium. Like, that's going to be fulfilling. And so that's when I went directly into coaching, after retiring. And I had a hell of a time, coaching, to be honest. Sarah, I remember, coaching you guys like down at, when I came back, and I was tough. Like, I don't think I had, I was really, I actually I think I was talking to the athletes like I talked to myself. Like, it was very like, no bullshit, get it done, no excuses. You can't do a push-up. No, that's not good enough. And all of this like really like harsh, like, language that I used to motivate myself. And it worked. But again, it was like fueling these demons that like, I just realized, for a lot of people, like that's not helpful. Not a lot of people, for everybody. It's not helpful to like, question how hard they're going. Like, that's really bad coaching, and so I got stuck. Like, I was like, I don't know how to help someone like cultivate their own fire. Like, I'm just giving them my fire. Like, I'm just like, go hard, not enough, keep going. And that, again, only works to a point. Right? Because it's not empowering the other person. It's not helping them learn more about themselves. It's literally just, I think it's like level 1 of like really knowing yourself. Like, I think about this with like, discipline is just, that's like novice. Like, that's beginner level. Like, for a coach to be like, do what I say, like, there's this great book, this old like lifting coach, Dan John. And he's like, I don't start coaching an athlete unless they brush their teeth and floss their teeth twice a day. Because I don't want to teach discipline. Like, I want them to like already have that. So then we can actually get to the interesting stuff. But, don't know, long story long. So I think I was just coaching discipline, if you will, and just like shooting out skills and whatever, but not really being able to pay attention to what that person needed. And so I had a really, when I stopped coaching, it was because I was actually coaching two of my teammates from 2012. They were making a run for the 2016 Olympics. And one of them, her mother had passed away from breast cancer in 2012, and she made it. And her mother's, wish for her was to be an Olympian and to get a medal as an Olympian. That was like her, which is just a wonderful but brutal, last words to have from, your mother of like, and so that's all she knew. She wanted to go back and fulfill, get another medal, because she, didn't really know what else to do, but was just needed more, warmth than I was really giving her. And this other athlete, I think, she just, we had a really hard, we were kind of built the same. But she just had a really hard time of like really wanting to like own the work, and take responsibility for the pain. And I don't blame either of them. Like this is, and it didn't work out. Like I was not the coach for them. It was not the time for me to be coaching. So, but it sucked. It sucked that I couldn't help somebody. I became extremely humbled and realized like, I need to go back to school. Like I need to learn more about how to like relate and listen to humans, and be a better contributor to society, because like, telling them like not good enough or giving them, throwing skills or technique at somebody is not going to get the best out of them. It's actually helping them like be more resilient and flexible and, And so anyhow, as I digress again, that's how I got, I applied to, this doctorate program a couple years ago, in Berkeley. And, it was one of the only programs in the country that you got to work with people in the first year. So I got to work in a clinic, as you guys can appreciate, like as an athlete, like, I'm like, I don't want to learn about it. Like, get me in there, coach. Like, just put me in there. And so that was why I chose the Wright Institute. And they just have, just wonderfully, wonderful professors and support. I want to back up
chronologically for a second here too, because it seems like you and your all-world elite trainer, Brian McKenzie, operated a number of businesses together over the years, and that in those companies you wore a number of different hats. Can you paint a picture for our student athlete listeners who may be considering a career as a performance coach, entrepreneur, what a typical day looked like, and that is to say as a small business owner or operator, and talk about those unofficial roles that maybe a performance coach might occupy in addition to this coaching context?
Easily I forget that part. I was running operations on, so he in 2012, Brian and I were still just dating, but he was a very charismatic and forward-thinking coach. And so I really liked his messaging around, it's about quality, not quantity. And it seems like so simple, but in the endurance world, like that is such a novel message of like, we just think of like repetition, like do it again, I'm sure you can, appreciate that with all the 20K rows, Sarah. But so with his messaging and just different way of looking at training and getting the best out of somebody about doing more, focusing more on the technique, I could really get behind that. And so he's still like the constant entrepreneur. And so he, started a supplement company. And so I started, organizing that, and then, had this training company going. And I started organizing that. But, Brian he's again, a very good starter, and I'm like a finisher. So I was like, trying to jump around, trying like to finish all these projects and organize them. And it's, I find it really interesting. And when I was, I went to a seminar for the USOPC, and they gave a statistic that like athletes, majority of athletes want to be entrepreneurs, which I find so funny because like, for the most part, like, especially team sport athletes, like we work we like know how to work in a team. But I think that there's this like relentless drive and to, that I found as well, like doesn't matter. Like, I don't want to work a 9 to 5. Like I want to like find this goal of like doing something really hard and challenging and bring it to life. And so that was, I suppose that's kind of what I tried to help do with all of Brian's ideas. Like not being an entrepreneur is I don't want to paint a pretty picture if I haven't already kind of put a hole in that balloon. But being an entrepreneur is really hard because in sport, I think the reason why it's so great is because it's a petri dish. Like it's a petri dish of stress, and there's rules and there's boundaries, and everybody follows the rules, and there's a time to go to practice and there's a workout to finish. But being an entrepreneur, like there's no end. Again, going back to this, like, there's no arrival. It actually made me like really frustrated. Like I had to leave work unfinished every single day. Like there was never like, even if I like had a goal for the day of like, okay, I'm just going to like respond to all the, customer service messages, or I'm going to like build out, the new, financial plan or some like marketing email message or something like that. It felt so unsatisfying because there's no rules or boundaries. And so anyhow, it was really hard. It was a really hard transition, I think, for me to go from this sport where it was like, there's a finish line, and there's a certain workout every day, to, gosh, when is it done? Like, I don't know. But yeah, so here we are. I think it's kind of like the self-selection. At least this happens in rowing, right? Like we're not going to paint a pretty picture. Like it's going to be really hard. And if you still want to keep going, like if you're still interested, then good, then you should, but I don't think, again, we should make, I don't know, this transition, if you will, or the options. Like I'm not a good saleswoman, as you can tell, but I think if you really have this great idea and this capacity for ambiguity and distress, then by all means get into entrepreneurship.
What are the skills that have to be developed? Is there some prerequisites that you have to to accomplish for like our regular non-Olympian people who want to get into this kind of career? Do they need special degrees required, like routes that have to be taken? Can you talk about that a little bit?
To be an entrepreneur,
performance coach, entrepreneur.
Performance coach, yeah. No. And I think that's kind of like the great and the scary part. You don't need any prereqs. My former partner, Brian, used to say, like, I went to the school of hard knocks. And it's just, it really is. I think it just takes relentless persistence. There's a great podcast. Guy Raz, How I Built This. Yeah. He's such a great interviewer. But yeah, he interviews a lot of like, entrepreneurs that, created successful companies. And it's really interesting to hear the stories. Like I just, heard one about, Tony Say, I believe that's how his last name is, the, gentleman who unfortunately just passed, who created Zappos, or was one of the co-founders of Zappos. And he just talked about like, there are so many times where they should have thrown in the towel for Zappos, but he just kept going, So I think there has to be this like, again, relentless persistence and drive. I think as a performance coach, if you will, like I'm still learning. I honestly don't think I'm a good coach yet. I have been fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of good coaches. And what I can say about them is what separates a good coach from a great coach, I guess. These great coaches like have the ability to sit and listen, like, and just, it's more than listen. Like it's like, look at you in your eyes and like be with you, like really, they really want to understand where you're coming from. Like I have this, great mentor. I'm actually thinking of like, as I'm thinking of this right now, or as I'm reviewing this, of like, when I'm like sitting across from him, there's nothing going on that will distract him from looking at me. Like he is just so engaged. He's like, what's going on? How can I help? Let's like find some solutions, like, and it's this, I think it really, and this is, actually what I hope to be as a therapist as well, is just helping somebody feel important, like that they really matter, that they're really necessary, and I think that's what a great coach is. And I hope to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just so powerful. And I want to return to the subject of psychology that you're studying. Now, mental health is such an important performance and health factor, and it's the subject du jour right now, especially among athletes. Can you describe to us how you think mental health ties into athletics, and what improvements do you want to see made in this area?
How much time do we have left?
As much as you'll give us.
Yeah. I'm such a grasshopper, and like that I really want to understand more about this. I think there's this wonderful movement that's happening right now in the world of sports, that there is more of a spotlight on mental health, like more than ever in the history of the sport. And which is like just so ironic, because anybody who's been at any level of sport, really, I mean, you realize that there's not much that separates you physically. I mean, and especially at the Olympics, like you're looking over at somebody and you're like, physically, like they look much, more qualified to be here than I am. So I think sports in the end is really a psychological game. So yeah, just the irony that mental health is just now coming around, and getting some traction is kind of funny. But, I'm kind of curious as to, as my old national team coach used to say, is like, be careful opening Pandora's box, which was his way of saying, don't go to therapy.
Wow.
Yeah. Not so subtle, right? But
yeah.
I think, at first, and when I first started studying, I was like, God, like that is the worst message to give somebody. And I really don't, I think it's not healthy, right? Like it's not healthy to be repressing a lot of, especially like, just a lot of emotional stress. It'll come out in the weirdest ways if you aren't processing it. So don't think that's the solution, but I do think there is something to what he's saying. Like, I think that from what I'm gathering, a lot of the really successful athletes, if you will, to throw that word back in there, have really strong and fast demons. Like, there's something fueling them to be obsessively pushing themselves to the nth degree. I actually think that people who, and again, I don't know if we were born this way or if it just becomes this way, but like, or if we create these demons rather, but like, to take away all of that, I guess, psychic energy, if you will, to open it up all at once can be really dangerous, and I think, I do think that, there are some well-adjusted athletes that are doing it for the love of the sport and for community and for their country and whatnot. But to be honest, like, I haven't seen, like, those are the unicorns. I think for the most part, a lot of people know a lot of psychological distress, and sport is a way for them, again, to have these boundaries, to have this like family, if you will, and to feel somewhat safe in this world of like uncertainty. So I think mental health is important, but I think it needs to be done very carefully, especially with athletes, because it's this, you have to like learn with the right therapists and psychologists. They will help you learn how to, again, like, integrate this identity as an athlete and, what may be driving you to want or need to be so successful, into something that's a little bit healthier, like that's, well, and by healthy, I mean a little bit more flexible, like that's, that your whole, self-concept and like your confidence, isn't intertwined into winning and losing. So again, I think it's a really delicate, mental health with athletes is a really delicate thing. And it's one, and it's really no surprise to me, that people are having a really hard time on the back end of transitioning and on the back end of retiring from sport, because we just try to repress a lot of things. And I think it fueled us to get to where we were. But if there's any time to really hone in to mental health, I think it's in this transition period. I think that having somebody that can help you make sense of what's going on, and again, like help you integrate your identity. I kind of like what you said earlier, Joe, of like this identity transition. And I think it's more of like this, it's a transition, it's an evolution. And I like that language better because I've heard a lot of research talk about a loss of identity when you transition from sport. And I think that's bullshit. Like, I don't think you're losing your identity at all. I think you're just you have to figure out how to integrate it. So yeah, I appreciate that you guys use the transition way to describe it.
Absolutely. And that is the purpose of this show. The title of this is Forever a Golden Bear. It's talking about how when you're an athlete, you're not just an athlete once, then you retire, it's completely done. You are an athlete for the rest of your life. The things you do, the things you learn, those go through and throughout your life forever. So I want to talk about that a little bit more, this transition and how to cope with that and how to leverage your experiences as an athlete. I want to talk about the intangible benefits of these thousands of hours you invested as an athlete, or workouts, lifting, going through walls, all that stuff. Our audience is very interested whether the sensibilities you developed as an athlete are transferable to your post-sports work right now. So for that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Perfect, Robert. So Erin, we hear a lot about the advantages embedded in the mindset of former athletes at work. So, discipline, time management, organization, teamwork, along with, those disciplines along with others that supposedly give former athletes the edge in the workforce. Mm-hmm. And, the edge can be, I'm sure through your research, you're trying to find, the word and the language to define what the edge is. But one of the books I've read recently is Grit by Angela Duckworth. Mm-hmm. And she talks about the edge as being grit and, the power of passion and perseverance. And one of the quotes that she writes that I love is, to be gritty is to keep putting one foot in front of the other. To be gritty is to hold fast to an interesting and purposeful goal. It's to invest day in, week after week in challenging practice. To be gritty is to fall down 7 times and to rise 8. So how does that land for you?
Yes. I actually I've been rereading Angela's studies, the grit, the stuff that she's talked about with grit. And then also before that, what was it? Carol Dweck over at Stanford. Sorry, can I say Stanford on here?
We'll allow it.
Okay, thank you. But anyhow, she has this similar concept called growth mindset. And I think that these are, again, going back to this, like these intangibles, or thinking, like these things that, I think you do grow as an athlete and as part of a team of like this resilience. And I also think it can be dangerous. I think that there is a cost to not quitting. And I think she touches on this lightly, but there's like a dark side of this, of like it not knowing when to stop, but to go back and not play the devil's advocate on all sides. I do think that there is, and I'm just seeing this like in my own graduate school program. I think what really transferred over for me is like, yes, I think I am more persistent. And I think it actually is dangerous at times. But I think what's really interesting is that I'm more aware of everybody around me. And I don't know, like I'm curious if this is like I mean, I imagine this is with like individual athletes too, because they're not, isolated. They're within a system as well. But I think the reason why athletes become great members of society and great, contributors to companies is because they know they aren't like operating in their own world, if you will. Like there is an awareness of other teammates. And, one of my 2008 teammates, Lindsay Shoup, just wrote a book, Better Great Than Never. And she was talking about this, in rowing, it's such a wonderful but maddening sport because you can be the fittest person around. But if you put your blade in before everybody else and you give the impulse before everybody else, that power can be absorbed and it can, be leaked out and the boat won't go anywhere. You actually have to learn how to put the blade in with everybody else and apply power with everybody else in order for it to go. And so I think there has to be this like balance of like, making yourself strong, but knowing that's not gonna make, everything click automatically. You have to learn the timing of it, right? And you have to like do it with everybody else. I think that there's this relentless pursuit and wanting, this ability to want to learn to do better, that can, lead to some perfectionism, if you will. But I really think what makes athletes special is this ability to be aware of others.
Erin, you've been so generous with your time today. So I have one last question for you. We've talked about this transition from athletics to a non-sports career. We've talked about this fine line and this balance between being really driven and into your sport, but also being multifaceted and paying attention to the other things in your life. There's a lot of athletes out there who are having this transition of self-identity, and it's really difficult. And they're having this feeling of being untethered, deeply uncertain about who they'll become and how their life will unfold. So considering everything we've talked about today, we're wondering if the 30-something-year-old you could give advice and career guidance to the 22-year-old you. What would you recommend and what would you say?
So this is the me that's like transitioning.
Yes, you are
out
talking
of
to
sport.
22-year-old Erin right now at Cal.
I guess cliches are cliches because they're somewhat useful. But I would say like you are where you're supposed to be. Like I always thought I was supposed to be somewhere different or doing something more, or I was doing it wrong. But I was, deeply unsettled and not so much because I right after Cal, because I had, this other family team to transition to on the national team. But after I left the national team, like I was deeply unsettled. And I think I'm still trying to like find solid ground a little bit. But I think a lot of that was like fueled by this belief that I was doing it wrong. Like that me being uncomfortable was a sign that like, I don't know, there was something wrong with me. And I've learned that this uncertainty is actually just such a precious time because you're more open. Like I was so used to being so fine-tuned at something and like thinking that I was in control, which is kind of like, the cosmic joke. But like, once I zoomed out and realized that there's so much more beyond, putting the blade in the water and taking it out. Like, that I was overwhelmed. And with that, like, it was very disturbing and unsettling. And I just wish I had somebody, or I had told myself that, like, this is how you're supposed to feel. Like, you're supposed to feel this way. And this means that now this is learning. Like, frustration, actually, they've like measured that sensation is you learning. That's you changing. So if you're not frustrated, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning. So I think I would just tell myself, you're where you're supposed to be.
That's amazing. And really quick, how can our listeners follow you? How can they reach you?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to sneak into anonymity. I can't even say it. So I'm trying to kind of go into the background a little bit, because there is a lot I still want to learn, and I do think I do hope to like share more about this, but I don't really. You can find me on social media. I'm not active, but you know what? I will give out my personal email, because I do. Or maybe you can put it in the show notes too.
We can do that.
Because I would love, to talk to, more so listen. I don't really have much to talk about. Well, I would love to listen to anybody that's struggling right now, and just help them in any way I can, because that would be the best way to find me, not on social media or any public domain. So email.
Well, that is
me.
so generous of you. And I'll tell you another way that people can reach you is listen to this episode a million times. You made us think today in a way that I haven't thought in a long time. You're reflective. You're insightful. It really, changes the way I think about a lot of things. So I want to thank you for being here. You are amazing.
Aww.
You are, your name
Thanks,
just
Robert.
resonates throughout UC Berkeley forever. You're forever a Golden Bear. It's just such a proud association to be able to speak with you. So thank you so much, and go Bears.
I appreciate you all. Go Bears.